Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's guest, Karen Chaston. Karen, how are you?
Good, thank you, Ian, and it's fabulous to be here.
Awesome. Now we got connected by a friend of both of ours, Alan Stevens,
Yep.
and he obviously knew what he was doing connecting us because we do similar work, and you
Mm-hmm.
do a lot of work around grief as well, which is
Yep.
awesome. I reckon I was going to ask you about your work, but I reckon what would be really cool is how did you get into the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, well, certainly wasn't what I intended when I left school, that's for sure. Little did I know that, I actually went to university when I was 38, believe it or not, and I did a master's in accounting. So completely different to what I do now. And I was in that corporate space, and I did become a CFO of a publicly listed company. Totally loved my life. But then in July 2011, my husband and I woke up on the 10th of July, a Sunday morning, thinking we were both going to have a lazy day at home. But within minutes, we were running out the back door, looking at our beautiful 27-year-old son, Dan, lying there in the fetal position, thinking that he was alive because saliva was coming out of his mouth. But, within seconds, the paramedics arrived and, they just took one look at Dan and they looked at me and they just went, "I'm sorry, madam, he's dead," and probably has been for several hours. Which, of course, is the last thing anyone expects. We all sort of think that we're going to pass in the order of our birth type thing. But I did what everyone does, what everyone just seems to do. The day after his funeral, I went back to work. I knew how to be a CFO. I didn't know how to be a grieving mother, nor did I want to be. And that sort of put me onto the road of doing everything that I now advise my clients not to do. And, loss is so much more than just death of a loved one. And grief is in so many situations that most of us don't even realize that they're a grief-causing situation. And that's what causes us so much trouble. So then that's what I did. I went back to work and I ate more and I drank more and I drank more and I worked even harder. Because that's what that's what we're told to do, isn't it? Keep busy, just give it time. Everything will be all right. Well, I'm here to tell you, and I'm pretty sure you're saying the same thing, Ian. It's all BS. That's not what to do. It's definitely not what to do.
Yeah. And like you, I learned that the hard way as well.
Yeah.
And the thing that you mentioned there, and we've talked about when we've chatted previously, is it's the event itself is extremely traumatic, and there's so much grief involved with that. But it's then everything else that then flows on after that, particularly when you ignore it and keep on.
Yeah, shoving it down with avoidance tactics. That's what we do. Like, look at our world. Like, seriously, Netflix, social media, shopping, everything's designed for us to avoid our life, avoid our feelings, which isn't good.
No. So what was it that had you having to face those feelings? So what stopped you in your tracks?
Well, 15 months later, after Dan passed, after me giving even more of myself to my corporate life, I had a choice to make. I could have moved with the newly formed company, not a CFO, but doing everything you're doing now plus more, Karen. Please come with us. And, they gave me the greatest gift, and they gave me a really easy choice to make 24 hours after I got out of my anger. They gave me a contract which was for 2/3 of what my current salary was at that time. And look, it was still a great salary, but it wasn't what I was earning, and I knew how much I put in. And so I got really angry for 24 hours. And then I sort of came out of what I like to call my Groundhog Day days. I started to realize that I'm really only going through the motions. I look successful on the outside, but, I'm using all of these avoidance tactics just to get through the day. I'm stressed. And, the funny thing is, if anyone said to me at that time, "How do you cope with stress?" I would have said, "I never get stressed." And my assumption was right because I was always in this heightened state. I never did the deep dive up and down. So from my perspective, I was always even, but I was always angry. I was always just waiting to go off over anything. So when I chose redundancy, and it was really the best thing that ever happened to me, that's what got me to stop. That's what got me to actually go, what the frig's going on here? And look, you know, I have a son on the other side who loves to plant ideas into my head. And the more I sort of got out of this daze, the more I started to actually hear them and see them and feel them.
Oh, yeah, I feel that.
And it was just literally like, Mom, what are you frigging doing? I passed, nothing happened. You know, redundancy's now here. You got to listen. And if you don't, it would have been an illness, or it could have been even death. Who knows what would have come my way? But I know that something would have come my way to wake me up. So it was a gift. And that's why I call my programs the gift of loss, because it stopped me. It stopped me to go, you're not even living and loving your life. What's the point? What's the point?
Wow, I got tingles through so much of that. Those messages from loved ones
I love
past.
that you not only get them, but you acknowledge them. You know, so many men won't acknowledge those, what I like to call, you know, like the God tick, those tingles that are actually going, you got to listen to this. This is important.
Yeah. Well, I'm a junkie for it now, I guess. Like, it was the experiences I used to only get in sport, and then realizing that actually it was possible in other areas. It becomes something that's, it's important to me. So I appreciate you shining a light on that.
Yeah.
So I know you said, yes, there's a gift in grief, but as we've talked about, that gift is not the moment. The moment itself is horrendous, right? So what was that like, having to face, like, your son had got so close to being home and where you could have done something, but he doesn't make it through the front door, and you having to face that? What was that like for you and your husband?
Well, we completely handled it completely differently, which you will see. And there was no right way or no wrong way. My husband went inside, went into silence. He actually stopped. Whereas I was like, no, I can't sit down. I can't do this. I'm moving. And, you know, I wanted the family around me because, you know, Dan has a twin brother and he also has an older brother. He also has a half sister who I adopted out when I was 16, and she was in our life. And it was, you know, obviously she was going through a whole lot more different sort of grief, because she'd been sort of putting us, you know, over here, and then her half brother passes and she's like, holy shit, you know, I thought I had time to have a relationship with you down the road, but now you're gone. So that made her sort of go, well, I do want a relationship more so. So there is a gift, but it really is about us actually, you know, there's Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She has written The 5 Stages of Grief, you know, and they're amazing, the research that she did into it. And she showed us how we do grief. The problem is many people take it as this is how we do grief. We've got to go into these emotions and we've got to figure them out, and then we've got to move through them. And she clearly says you won't get them all in this order, but you will eventually end up in acceptance, right?
Yeah.
Which is not what her book was designed to do. It wasn't telling you this is how you do it. This is how we are doing it. So after my redundancy, when I started to then become a life coach and all these sort of things where I had to deep dive into me first. And that's what I think every single loss event in your life is all about. It's about helping you to stop, look at where you are, figure out what you want to bring with you, figure out what you want to dump, and figure out what you want to start doing that you've never done. That's what I truly believe it's all about. So in that, I had to do that with me first. And the funny thing about it is the more that I deep dived into me, I found out there was a whole lot of baggage that I've been dragging around for a very long time that was just weighing me down, and I've got to just release this. And it's not easy. I don't care what anyone says. It is not easy to deep dive into yourself, because you're going to find all of your gold, but you're also going to find all of your shadows. And we all love our golden side, but do we really love our shadow side?
Embracing it and accepting it and being able to move through it, though, is what allows us to come out the other side with that gift, right?
Totally. And it also allows you to actually to remove the shadow, to actually say, well, do you know what? And it also stops people reflecting the shadow to you, which is the best part of all.
Yeah.
Is that you can go, I don't need that anymore. Thank you very much. I have already dealt with that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we'll come back to boundaries, and also I want to come back to your daughter, because I know that's a big part of the grief. So when your son passed, you got on with it, and again, I hope you don't mind me
no, that's fine.
there, but so even now you've moved on from it quickly, but I'm curious to hear from, because people are hearing about this gift and the grief, but I think it's really important to shine a light. You mentioned the shadows. So what was, looking back, what was going on for you? What were you, by getting on with work, what were you trying to hide from?
I was hiding from the fact that I didn't want to be a grieving mother. I didn't want to be stuck in that. I didn't want to be labeled that. I didn't, so especially the first 6 months to a year later, people were always on like tenterhooks around me. I even saw people cross the road not to have to talk to me more than anything else. And that's one thing that I love to deal with now, is the fact that we're so uncomfortable around loss, especially death of a loved one. Like, we're so uncomfortable. We don't know what to do. We don't know what to say, whether it's like the loss has happened to us or to someone else. And it's ridiculous, because the best thing to say is, I don't know what to say. I have no idea what you're feeling. I have no idea what you're going through, but I'd like to be here for you in whatever way you would like me to be here for you. And then it's about, being quiet and listening. But obviously at the time, 10 years ago, back in 2011, I didn't understand what I understand now. I hadn't deep dived into loss the way that I have now. So I avoided it. I drank more. I worked more. I ate more. I got angrier. I even had fights with people, which I have apologized to since once I deep dived into loss. I had a girlfriend. She had been separated from her husband for 5 years, and she was with her new boyfriend. We were all out to dinner, and she was still going on about the fact that he had played up on her, and she was angry with him, and yada, yada, yada. And I just went for it. I just went, shut up. I lost my son. I've got over it. Why can't you get over your divorce? And it was wrong. It was so wrong of me, so naive of me. There is no hierarchy in loss.
No.
And that's one thing we all really do need to understand, is a death doesn't trump a divorce. A job loss doesn't trump your pet passing or anything like that. Losing your livelihood is just as important as losing a child or losing your loved one. And that's what's really important. And that's what I really love to help people to understand, is the fact that loss is loss. We all have emotions. We don't understand the relationship that you have lost. You don't understand what, the two people were like, or the job and you were like. So it's really important for us to understand that we don't know what people are feeling. And for us to say, I know what you're going through, you don't. But for you to say, I don't know what you're going through, but I'm here to listen, and then be quiet and listen, is just so important. Imagine the world if we were all like that.
Yeah, amazing. I think that what you just said then is such a great lesson for everyone at the moment. We see different things going on other parts of the world, and we might then, because I've heard it from people, downplaying what they're going through. Oh, but in perspective, like, we haven't got it as bad as these people here and these people here. And it's like, yeah, they're going through different things, but don't downplay what you're going through. You're going through a challenging time. That's okay. And be okay to talk about it, and be okay for other people to be there for you, just to listen, because otherwise we're doing ourselves a disservice and we're not able to actually process whatever we're going through.
Yeah, I totally, and we're doing ourselves a huge injustice in actually going, I need help. we all think that there's something wrong with us if we don't know what to do and if we ask for help. Whereas no one knows what to do when you're in a situation you've never been in before. Well, we don't learn anything at school about it. We certainly, unless we do a psych degree or something like that, and even then I'm not even 100% sure that, what they learn is the best way to go forward anyway, sort of thing, because experience really does make a difference to obviously a textbook intelligence. And I'm not bringing them down. I'm just saying that when you go through something, you can probably empathize a little bit more. But our feelings are our feelings, and our feelings are our friends. And most people will never say that their negative feelings are their friends, but they're your guides. They're your guides for you to deep dive into and go, what is this about? What do I need to heal? What do I need to forgive? What do I need to acknowledge? What do I need to apologize for? Because that's what your feelings are actually bringing up for you to help you to move forward and to release them. Energy, emotions.
Absolutely. And so even the good emotions, they're showing you want more of that in your life.
Yes.
And the other ones are showing you that there's some work to do. And you touched
We
on
all
this.
get high on that dopamine, don't we?
You touched on this before, and then the world mirrors back to us different things too. And so if other people are going through different things and we're getting frustrated at what they're going through, well, that is shining a light for us on something something within them that we can identify within ourselves that's causing this reaction. And so, at every moment there's an opportunity to, as you described, see our feelings as our friends so that we can navigate whatever's coming next.
Yeah.
So you, like you said, it probably was a challenging time when you had to give up your daughter when you were 16. You said it wasn't until down the track where you actually identified it as grief and loss. So tell me about, like, where did that awareness come to you on the journey? How long after losing your son?
After Dan passed. Even though she was in my life, I never saw it as grief. I never saw it as loss as such. It was only when I started to really deep dive in and I read a book, which is from the Grief Institute, which started off saying there are over 40 different loss events. And they didn't actually have the list published in the book. So I went looking and I created my own list and I've added to it. And the funny thing is that adoption was not on any of the lists that I actually originally found.
Interesting.
And I've obviously got it on mine. But because adoption is actually, especially in the 70s, it was 1973 when I adopted my daughter out. And that was always seen as a positive thing. You're giving your daughter a better life. You are young and you're not married and there's stigma and all of this sort of stuff towards what you've done. And there is also a lot of, shame put on you. You were like, how dare you do that? Have sex when you're not married and all that sort of stuff. So there is a lot of all of that that's dumped on you, but it's not seen as loss. It's seen as a positive thing. You're giving them a better life. You're giving them to a family that is older, more financial. They will look after it. But as my daughter says, and it's quite interesting, is you gave me to strangers. And just because they were older and more financial and all those sort of things. And I was going, yeah, but that wasn't what we were told. We were told that we're doing the right thing by you and doing all this sort of stuff. And this could be a whole, show all on itself.
Yeah.
The journey that her and I have been on together. And it has been an interesting 20-year journey. But it was when we started to not only get vulnerable with each other that our relationship moved into the next phase, which is a great phase that it's in now. But it was also the fact that I realized and acted verbally say was, well, I was lied to as much as what you were lied to. And, but it wasn't lies on behalf of my parents. It was more ignorance, if that makes sense. Because I didn't understand that a baby requires touch to feel secure, to feel loved. my daughter spent 6 weeks in a hospital because I had 6 weeks to change my mind. In a hospital, just being fed and changed, like how busy are nurses? Could anyone have sat down and cuddled her? What a mother would do with a newborn. So I didn't understand that. Obviously, I did 8 years later when I had my first son. But it was completely, oh, wow, what has she missed out on? I didn't understand that there was always going to be this thread that connected us emotionally, even though, I read in a book the other day that you squatted in my uterus for 9 months as a person describing, having a go at their son or something. You've squatted in my uterus for 9 months and now you're squatting on me again. Yeah, it was just a joke. Yeah. But when you think about it, she was with me for 9 months. Actually, she was with me for longer because she was about 2 weeks overdue. So, there is that connection. And so there was always going to be that grief. There was always that pull. I never understood that at 16. If I had, I would have chosen differently. No one wants to set themselves up to always be wondering what's going on in someone else's life.
Yeah, and we all make decisions at the time based on the information we have. It doesn't mean we're right or wrong. It's just we're doing the best that we can. And your parents were doing the same. They thought it was the right thing to do, which you get to, right?
Yeah.
So how did you make peace with that? How did you, because obviously that would have brought up a lot of different emotions. How did you make peace with
So one
that?
of the processes that I do with the people that I work with is we do it's called a conscious alignment. So I actually I did my process, my conscious alignment on myself, but I didn't do it with my adult daughter. I did it with the baby. Okay. So we do the process. And so I had to come to terms with the baby that I adopted out, not the adult. And that's where we go through a whole process, and I end up at the end of it. You end up actually coming up with things that you'd like to acknowledge, you'd like to forgive, and you'd like to obviously apologize for. And then you write a letter, and then you read that letter out to someone. That's part of the process. So I did that. Nice. It was nice, obviously very, very emotional. And the funny thing about it is that once I did that, she wasn't aware that I was doing it, right? Because it was to her, but it was more to her inner child. Our relationship changed. As our adult relationship changed as soon as I healed the relationship with the baby that I adopted out. Does that make sense?
It does. And from what I know of is that when we let go of something we've been holding on to a long time, our whole energy shifts. And so, there's people that come into a room and we go, oh, wow, there's something about them, or, oh, right, there's something about them. Our energy changes. So sometimes we don't even have to say anything. We turn up in a different way and immediately there's a different reaction.
Yeah. And so I did this. I think I did it was before we went into COVID. And then she went into, like, last year we didn't see each other at all because she lives in Sydney, I live on the Gold Coast. So in 2020, that was the year that she really missed me, whereas she hadn't. Like, I lived in Sydney for 15, I was born in Sydney, then I moved to the Gold Coast in 77, and then I moved back in 2003, and then I've moved back to the Gold Coast in 2019. So I've played between the two of them. So in the years that I was in Sydney, we didn't have a great relationship. But when I moved back to the Gold Coast, that was another thing that made us closer. I know it sounds ridiculous because distance does make you, and I had made the commitment that I would come down every 3 months, which I was doing in 2019. But then, of course, in 2020, it wasn't possible. And that's when it came to the conclusion that she, wanted a better relationship. She wanted to get closer. She really missed me. And that's why just recently I went down for 5 days and I stayed 6 weeks, because even though we were in lockdown, we could walk every morning because we were both on the northern beaches for an hour and a half every morning, which made us even closer. Because when even she said one day we were sitting at a park bench. I won't tell you where, but we sat at a park bench for 2 hours, and we said, where else would you do that? Like, we would never have done this in our relationship, but it was just amazing. We just sat there and we talked and, sort of thing, and we weren't moved on, and there was a few people around, but it was just so beautiful.
We won't tell anyone.
The simple things.
You were exercising your hands.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But we had been walking for a long time before that. So, yeah.
Yeah, just resting. So you went through this period of change and you got a different reaction out of her. And to me, that's something that's important to really emphasize, is that we can want to fix people or help them to change or help them see in a different way. When it comes back to us and we change, then we get a different reaction. It's like what the definition of insanity or whatever, like doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different result.
Yeah.
The only thing you can truly control is how you show up, what you do. Yeah. So I love how that came off the back of you doing your deep dive, you describe it, going through some healing and then being able to really reconnect that relationship. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah. And, and I also stopped drinking at the end of 2018. I decided to have 2019 as an alcohol-free year. Just as a test, I just thought, I don't know if I can do it. I feel it's time. And there was a few reasons why I wanted to do it. I wanted to vibrate higher. I didn't want alcohol in my system. I know, because I knew I could connect more with my son on the other side if I didn't have it in my system, and we have. But also I knew that whenever we got together and we were both drinking, we would end up fighting. So that was another good reason to give it up. So I stopped drinking for 2019, and I haven't even taken it back up because I love who I've become. I don't miss it. I don't crave it, which is surprising. I used to drink a bottle of wine a night, right? In my corporate life, that was my coping mechanisms. That was my avoidance. That was my come home, just sit, just numb myself. This is what I do. So everyone would thought there's no way you could stop. My husband and I would Monday morning, right, we're not drinking this week. Monday night, I'd rock up home with a bottle of wine. We're drinking this week. Sort of thing. But seriously, it was so easy because I was ready to do it. I knew that all the benefits would come from that. And it's so true what you say, Ian. There's only one person you can change. And it's when you change and you show up what you're more being authentic, being more true to yourself. Everyone was like, wow, what are you doing? Like, you look amazing. You look younger. I look younger now. Normally I will show a passport photo, my 2007 and my 2017 passport photo. I look 10 years younger in my 2017 one than I do in my 2007. So I'm just like, oh my God, and that's what it is, because you're being more authentic. You're being true to who you are, and you'll just look younger and healthier. It's just amazing. If for no other reason at all, that's the best reason on earth to do it.
Yeah, 100%. A client this week told me that actually he reckons he's grown an inch. He's walking taller because part of his not confident, he would sort of hunch himself over, whereas now he's confident, walking tall, and it changes. It literally changes your physiology. So,
but it's also opening up your heart, because when you stand taller, you open up your heart space. Whereas if you're protecting yourself, you do tend to hunch down more because you're protecting your heart. Whereas when you go, no, I'm authentic, I'm right, you do stand taller and you are opening up, but your heart is what's going out as well. It's beautiful.
You touched on this a couple of times, and I want to explore this if we can. You said the relationship with your son is now deeper. You say you are the co-founder of the Chaston Centre because your son is the other co-founder. So much of the brains and intelligence beyond. No, I'm joking.
Totally. The things that I've done, honestly, the things that I've done, and I would never have done if Dan had still been in this realm. I just know, all the books I've written, the fact that I'm out speaking. I used to, when I was a CFO, I used to sit back and I'd look at my CEO out the front and I go, wow, look at him. How great is he? There's no way I could stand out there and talk like that and do all that. It's only because I wasn't passionate about what I was talking about. But once you find your passion, once, it's now like get the hook, drag her off stage sort of thing, because it is so true. But I know that he gives me all these ideas, even the things that we did for his first angel anniversary. There is no way I would have thought of that. It was him planting it in there. I had life-size photos of him so people could have a last photo with him. All these things. Everyone was
That's
like,
cool.
everyone was like, oh my God, you're so weird. Like I had even my sister and my daughter, they were going, there's no way I'm standing next to Dan and having a photo of him. And it was like, get out of the photos. They're going, no, this is really cool. And it was just like, exactly, because I just listened to my guidance. I just thought, why wouldn't anyone want to have another life-size photo with you? Like, you don't want a little one. So, yeah.
Yeah. And when you said, why wouldn't someone, like if anyone's watching this, maybe a bit skeptical, like I would have been probably 10 years ago, why wouldn't you want to have that relationship? Whatever you believe in afterlife, like everything is energy, everything goes back to energy. Things don't disappear. Energy is still here. Why wouldn't you want to believe that you can have that connection? And when you have that belief, everything that comes, the magic that comes from that connection, again, why would you not want that?
He shows up in so many family photos. Like he's, there's a group photo of his twin brother, Josh. He got married in 2018. He had 2 weddings, one in Poland and one in Australia. And the one in Australia, not only is Dan in that photo, but so is my dad, who passed away in 2003. But you've got to love the cameras. We can deep dive into him where I can find him. There's another photo that was taken in 2016 where we went to a wedding of my oldest son's friend. And, they all grew up together. And there's Dan on the tree behind my husband. His face is as clear as anything. And it's like he's always showing us that he's there. He's always, rainbows, dragonflies. We know it's Dan. Feathers are my father. But it is about you actually looking. On the day of Dan's funeral, the amount of people who commented on seeing Dan number plates as they either drove to the wake or from the wake. It was just about everyone there said, I saw a Dan number plate. And I'm going, exactly. He was showing us that he was around. So, yeah.
I feel like I've said this a lot of weeks, but we want those people back in our life.
Yeah.
We also know that it has put us on a journey to something that we could never have imagined without that event happening. So talk me through how you go from the place of being in that grieving state and maybe stuck in that for some time, whether it's through avoidance or different things. How do you help people to then see that there is the gift?
Yeah. Well, I have created this 5-step process, which in the first one is to stop. We don't do it. None of us stop. And it's in that stopping that you start to do that deep dive in, because you start to actually look around and you actually go, okay, this has happened. What does it mean for me now? What does it mean for me going forward? And you start to then go into acceptance, which is the second step. And the acceptance is more about you going, okay, we had all of these hopes, dreams, and aspirations together. They're not going to happen. But that doesn't mean they can't still happen, just in a different form. So it is about you starting to just look at what this means. What does your life mean, without this person, if it is a death of a loved one, or even if it's a divorce, I'm going to have that empty chair. It's going to be different. How can we accept that the fact that I am going to be different moving forward to who I was yesterday? There is no going back to what you may call normal, because it's different. And then, of course, it's the identify is the third step. And I love identify, because that's where you do the deep dive. You deep dive into your emotions. You deep dive into what all those hopes, dreams, and aspirations were. But you also you start to identify the things that are incomplete in the relationship, the things that you said or did or didn't say, didn't do, so that you can start to identify all of these things that you do want to apologize for, you do want to forgive, and you also want to acknowledge. And I don't care what anyone says, in every single relationship, there are 2 people that make it and there are 2 people that break it, whether it's through whatever, through death or divorce or whatever. And it's about accepting your part in this breakdown of whatever this loss was about. Yep. And then from there you go into the complete stage, which I roughly talked about earlier, where you do actually formalize these things that you want to apologize for, forgive, and accept. and acknowledge. And then from there, the fifth step is the pivot stage. And I had this stage as long before COVID, and I know pivot's a little bit overused at the moment, but the pivot stage is where you start to deep dive into every single area of your life. And in the Chaston Center model, there are 9 areas of life, which I've broken down into 3 pillars: all about you, all about your relationships, all about your expertise, and all about your wealth creation. And because when we deep dive into all of them, we actually do an amazing exercise where you say, okay, this is where I am. This is where I want to be. What are the action steps in each and every single one of those areas of life I need to take that will close that gap so I can get to where I want to be? So that's the stages, and it is an amazing stage, because not only are you releasing all of your baggage, you are coming to a completion with that relationship. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to be sad moving forward. You are going to still have sad days, but you're also going to see the gift of it. But you're not going to be emotional where you can't talk about the person, where you still have anger, you still have all those negative feelings. But sadness is fine. Like, I still cry on certain days when Dan's not around, especially his 2 brothers are married. They both have sons, and Josh, his twin, is about to have his 2nd child in November. So it's more of a sadness of like, oh, I wish that Dan could have done this. It's that sort of sadness. But then I go, nah, he's doing so much more on the other side. And I also know that when my time has come, he'll be the first one. See, I'm getting emotional now. He'll be the first one to greet me as I go on to my next adventure. And he'll be able to show me the ropes on, right, Mum, this is what we've got. These are our newfound powers that we'd forgotten about that we had. So let's start. I'll show you how to use it, and then we can do whatever. So, yeah.
Oh, more tingles. Love that.
Yeah.
So stop. And I love that. I love that this is all very much how your own journey has been. So stop, because that's something that you pointed
It's
out.
all the opposite of what I did.
So,
that's why I've come up with it.
2 was accept. Was that right?
Yep, accept.
Yep. So acceptance. Yeah. 3, identify. So what's incomplete? Forgiveness, apologies, acknowledgement. Then 4th stage, complete, which is formalizing, and then 5th step, pivot, which is basically what's next, the plan, the vision, and mapping that out. I love it.
And in all of that, you find that gift, because I would never ever have been a speaker, an author, a life coach, and doing what I'm doing now if Dan hadn't passed. So there is a gift in him passing. Like, sure, I'd love to have him in this realm, but the gift is who I've become. And, depending on what your beliefs are, and I'm not here to tell you what to believe on a spiritual level, but I know that Dan and I planned this before we even came down here, that, this will happen, Mum, and this will, and I'll even tell you, when Dan, 6 months after Dan passed, I went to a medium. And I purposely waited 6 months because I thought that's what you have to. I now know that you don't have to wait that long. But at that stage, that's what I thought. And in it, he came through and he said so many things, so much so that the medium was writing her 3rd book. She actually said, I want to do a chapter on this reading. And she did, because so many things he said, I went, yep, that's this, all these different things. But what it was more than anything else, Dan actually said, I severed my life by 2 years. I was meant to pass at 29, not 27. And it took me a long time to deep dive into it. And then through various different things, I found out that it was meant to have been a sick Dan who passed at 29. But that wouldn't have shocked me. That wouldn't have shocked me to wake up to do what I'm doing now. Whereas a healthy 27-year-old going out and then finding him dead the next morning, that shocked me. Sure, it took me 15 months to get into that shock, but it did shock me.
Yeah, wow.
What's going on? There's more to this.
Oh, yeah, again, tingles. So much powerful information in that, Karen. And that what you just left us with then, that was my experience too. Is like, there's got to be more to this life. When someone goes, you're like, there's got to be more. Like, it can't be just that, because I don't think we sort of face our own mortality in a way that we kind of just think we've got forever. But it's like when that's sort of
No,
shoved in
we
our
don't.
face, it's like,
Yeah,
oh shit, maybe I need
yeah.
to get my act together.
And the beautiful thing is when you actually believe that, or even know it, in my case, you're not scared of death. So therefore you live your life. You know what I mean? You're thinking,
Yeah,
oh yeah, right, I'm doing this and I'm moving on and I've got this. But you also realize that your birth certificate doesn't have an expiry date on it. And like, sure, the date's been set. No one knows when it is, but it has been set. So, are you just sitting back and going through the motions, or are you actually going, no, I'm actually going to make sure that this life that I'm living at the moment is going to make a difference? And how do I make a difference? And how do I actually get out of bed every morning and go, I'm so excited about what's going to happen today? You know what I mean? As opposed to dragging yourself out of bed, going to a job that you hate, and all those sort of things. Yeah.
yeah. I think the line that you said there, massive. You want to know that you made a difference,
Yeah.
and something that I've faced is like I'm just not. So if you look forward now from where you are at this point,
Mm-hmm.
what is the difference that you want to make through the work that you do in the Chaston Centre?
Well, it is helping people to realize that you don't have to grieve and suffer. You can actually go unwrap that gift. You can find it. I've just completed a book which is called Demystifying Loss. Now, my other 4 books I self-published. This one I'm actually going to a publisher. It's important for people to realize that you don't have to go down the route that we've been doing for centuries of give it time, everything will be all right. No, you can deep dive into your loss. You can unwrap that gift. Sure, it's painful. Sure, it's not great. But the rewards at the end of it far exceed the avoidance tactics that we've all been living in for way too long.
Yeah, I like. I'm sure it was Les Brown. He said we got choice. We can experience 2 pains. You will experience pain in life, and you can choose. You can experience the pain of regret, where you don't do anything, but that's still playing out for you, or you can experience the pain of actually change, which has just amazing moments on the other side.
Yeah.
So, yeah, for anyone's watching, going, oh, that scares me. I don't want to go dive into that pain. I don't want to do the deep dive that Karen's talking about. I don't want to face all that pain. The pain will come out. It will. A guest of mine, Dean, some months back, was talking about how it will bubble to the surface, and it's exactly right. If you don't deal with it, it'll find a way out.
And at
And
normally the most inopportune moments, you do not want it to boil out.
yeah, 100%. So
Yeah.
you mentioned the that you were made redundant. Now, for
Yeah.
me, even though I took voluntary redundancy, there was still the grief of
Yeah.
rejection, because it
Oh,
was suddenly like, well, that was
huge
too easy. You
regret.
didn't seem to care that I was just going to leave. So what was it? What was the overriding emotion for you?
Oh my God, it was horrible. And what I didn't mention was my contract was either party had to give 6 months notice. So I was still there for 6 months, which was
Oof.
really hard. And obviously it was very much like you go from, I actually have an email from not the CEO who was part of my redundancy, but the one before him that actually said I was the oracle of the company. I set the standard. I set this.
Wow.
It's a really long email, right? Then, like 2 years later, I'm made redundant. And but I was treated, and this is the biggest thing with companies, and which is why I also do my people and profits, which, helps people to not only understand what I'm doing, but to help them to actually value their employees and realize that they are their greatest assets, which is another part of what I do. Because what happened was I was like I was a leper. My former boss, who also was called Dan, believe it or not, he could not look me in the eye. And I called a meeting with him. I said, look, you have given me the greatest gift you have ever given me, because I'd already started, even though I was there for 6 months, I had started, doing my life coaching, doing all this sort of stuff. I said, believe me, you've given me a great gift. But he couldn't look me in the eye. He's like, but Karen, I didn't fight for you. I said, don't worry about it. You weren't meant to fight for me. This is what I'm meant to be doing. And it took him a long time for him to even look at me. Like we'd be walking, towards each other, and he'd just like divert his eyes or whatever. I said, stop it. I said, just seriously stop it, because I'm fine. But that's the biggest problem, is the way that when you are made redundant, it is just like you've done something wrong. And I didn't do anything wrong. All I did was I looked after me, because I knew that if I had taken that job for less pay, doing everything you're doing now plus more, it would have eaten me from the inside out, and I would have got diseased, right? I understand emotions a lot more now, but even then, in my ignorance, I knew that it would have given me a disease. It would have given me cancer or whatever, just from the fact that I would have felt I was used and abused emotionally. More in, obviously not physically, but certainly emotionally, they were abusing me. And I had the gift of already knowing that the guy who was going to be my boss, there was no way I could have worked with him, and I was also at an age where I was like, I am so over doing all the work and someone else taking the credit and the pay for it. And that's why I knew I couldn't go from CFO down, because as CFO, obviously, I was more than happy to give credit to anyone, but certainly to myself when I was the one doing the work. So,
yeah, love it. If I think back about my redundancy journey, we were due to go overseas for 6 weeks to my brother-in-law's wedding. The day before, my boss said, "Oh, apparently you've got a redundancy on the table, but it won't be there forever." I'm like, "Really?" So I said, "Find out." And then next morning I go in. This is the day before we're flying out. He said, "Oh, yeah, here it is. Here's the deal." And I went, "All right, sweet. I'm out." So you had 6 months. I had 1 day. And they said, "Don't you
yeah.
need to pack up?" I'm like, "Oh, I've been packing up for years. I'd already moved on."
Well, actually, I should have actually fought it and made them pay me out there and then, instead of doing the 6 months. But anyway, you do what you're technically right to do.
Yeah, it all serves a purpose. You mentioned something there that you mentioned at the start. You help people to see their value, and through your own experience, you knew that your value to the marketplace, to the business, to life, to those people far
Yeah.
exceeded that. And yes, it's about the money, but it's also not. It's just like how much value I've got, and you going and lessening your value in that experience. Yeah,
Yeah.
100% right. It would have had all these adverse effects. So
Oh,
how do you help people now to see their value?
that every person that I have worked with, which is really funny, is what comes out when we deep dive into their losses and we get them to do a thing where they say, I've had this loss, and we put it into a list of which would they like to work for first. What comes up every single time is loss of identity. Every single time. And what it is life. From the time we were born, we come in, we know everything. We have everything, right? We're fun, we're loving, we know how to get our joy, we know how to find our fulfillment. And then in the process of growing up, and then our education system, and then going into work, we slowly chip away at this and chip away at that. Could be a relationship, it could be your loved one. Don't do that. Don't act like that. I don't like it when you do this. So we slowly lose who we are. Now, I am grateful to say that I've been married for over 43 years. My husband has always never stopped me from reinventing myself, right? You hope so, over 43 years. So I'm certainly not the woman he married all that time ago, but he's always allowed me to be whoever I was. If I'm going down this pathway, I'm doing this way and all that sort of stuff. But how many other people can say that? How many other people can actually say that their partner allows them to be and do, as crazy as this is, they allow them to be that, right? So I was very gifted, obviously, with a husband to be able to do that. So I guess I knew my value very early on. Okay, sure, I have a lot of crazy ideas. And I even crazier when I've got a son on the other side feeding me with all these crazy ideas. But the thing is that it's important for us to do that. So that's what I help people to do, is I help them to find their gold within them. When I was in my CFO role, I would have so many women come up to me and go, help me to get a pay rise. And I'm like, just go and ask for it. I said, together and go and ask. And they're going, no, I can't do that. So I would coach them not only on how to put their case forward, but how to actually ask for it, which is ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely ridiculous that we hold ourselves back so often. I grew up in a large family, so I knew how to use my voice, thank God. Otherwise, you would be clamfled on, sort of thing. But yeah, that's what I help people do, is I help them to find their essence, is the best way to put it. But to find their essence, even though it may be really, really buried, and so many people, it can be as simple as someone saying to you, why are you singing? You can't sing. And it's like, okay, I may be out of tune, but it gives me so much joy. I'm not going to, I'm still going to sing. And that's what people don't do. And that's what I love to help them to do. And that's all in the pivot stage. And that's what I love about the pivot stage.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I've realized how much energy I get from music in the morning, and I've made singing a part of that. And my family may not love that, but it's happening anyway. You got to find what works for you.
And it's movement. Like, how can you listen to music and not move? Yeah. So it's just getting all of those feel-good feelings into your body, which energizes you and just gives you so much more of a, zoom, so that you can go through your day. You top yourself up. So
yeah, 100%. We've already heard so much of where you bring value.
Thank you.
If someone wanted to ask about Karen detached from your business, you the mum, wife, coach, what would they say is most valuable about you?
I always find I'm very positive. I think I've always been positive, but I know I've got more and more positive. And I think one of my greatest thing is I look at things differently. I can see different perspectives. And I think the more that I do what I do, the more I can go, but what about this? You know what I mean? People will see things as, well, this is it. And I'm going, no, but there is also this perspective. And that's what I love. I think more about who I am is that I will sit back and I will just go, no, but what about this? I'm a really good listener. I never used to be, but I really am now. Believe it or not, you wouldn't think so. I've spoken the whole time, but I am a really good listener. And that's what I've found about my daughter, and it's apparently quite common with people who are adopted, is that they don't really know who they are because they become a bit of a chameleon. So they'll sit back and they will scan the room, and then they'll become that person in that environment. And I think I've learned a lot from her and in those conversations. She is an amazing listener. Like, she will tell me things that I said to her really, really early on, and I'm like, I don't even remember the conversation, let alone, so much detail in it. But it's really, really interesting that the more that I actually interact with her, the more that I can see the advantage in actually being and listening, and I think there's a great saying, which is, if you're talking all the time, get the weight, which is, why am I talking? So that you actually go, because you never learn anything when you're talking. You only ever learn when you're listening. So, yeah.
This is your platform to say whatever you like, Karen, so you don't have to apologise for doing all the talking today.
I wasn't apologising. Don't misunderstand. I was just stating the obvious.
Very good.
Sense of humour. I think everyone needs a sense of humour.
Yeah.
If you don't have a sense of humour, I really do feel sorry for people who don't have a sense of humour.
Yeah, and I'm drawn to, like, even the night my dad passed, there was still like family jokes going on, because that's just a way of coping, and I think it's one of those, like you talked about before, the different parts of grief, and we shouldn't feel this and we shouldn't feel that. It's like, find whatever way works for you to get through.
Laughter is the best medicine. Like, Dan, he had an autopsy, and we all went. So he had his two brothers, Dan's girlfriend, my husband, and I. We all went to the morgue in Sydney because he passed in Narrabeen, and we all went to the morgue. And then at the end of it, this amazing lady, I have to say, the amazing lady who had, gone through everything with us. And then at the end of it, she said, well, is there anything else I can do? And I just, being sarcastic, I just went, yeah, just wake him up and tell him that joke's over and we'll take him home. And she went, you can take him home if you like. And I was like, no. I was only joking. It's quite all right. So then we all get in the car and we're all very, solemn and all this sort of stuff. And then I went, imagine what would have happened if we'd taken him home. And then it was like, weekend at Bernie's, and we're all just sort of like topping each other at the things that we do. And we were laughing so much that it was just such a great energy release that people just don't realise. And because everyone thinks, oh, well, if you're laughing, you didn't love him. It's like, seriously? All these silly comments and silly beliefs that we've had for centuries. But no, honestly, laughter is the best thing.
Yeah, and it's not just beliefs that maybe other people are putting on us, but it's what we put on ourselves. Like we go through all those different emotions, the guilt, the shame, the like, like worrying about what you should do. So I love how you've highlighted the laughter and the weekend at Danny's. That's hilarious.
Yeah, it was like, oh my God, you've been quiet there, Dan. What are you doing? Why don't you have another drink?
Yeah. Hey, you mentioned something there that I wasn't expecting, but you said, so Dan had a girlfriend.
Yeah.
So how did you
Well,
deal
it's,
with
like, I have to say, Dan, so 2 years before, Dan had arrived back from his 2 years in the UK, and he brought his girlfriend back with him, and they were living together with us downstairs, not in a Harry Potter cupboard, but downstairs in a nice little area. And they had gone out separately that night. And so here she was, and I must say, I really do feel for her. When she arrived, she was like 2 months or 3 months after she arrived in 2009, she turned 21. So she was quite young. And then 2 years later, her boyfriend, who she thought she was probably coming to Australia with to live with forever, died. She stayed with us for another 18 months. And I think the three of us together, because the three of us obviously saw him lying there with, blood and all this sort of stuff. So when we went to the autopsy the next day, the three of us were in a hurry to go and see him because we knew he would look better than the day before. Whereas his two brothers were not as keen because they hadn't seen him in that position. But anyway, she stayed with us for 18 months and she's still in Australia. She now has two little boys. She's got a lovely partner. So, he was never meant to live with her but in Australia, but he was meant to bring her here. So there was a gift in that as well. And, so it wouldn't be easy at any age, and like I married my husband. I was, 3 months after getting married, I turned 21. And then, I had my first son at 24. So I kept putting myself in her position. Oh, imagine what would have happened if my husband had passed as Dan had passed. So that's why I said, you can stay with us for as long as you like, because I'd like to think someone else would have looked after me if it had been different. Yeah.
Wow. You talk about gifts. What a gift and what a blessing for her to have you and your husband to all grieve together and move through that.
Yeah. And it was, it was good to have someone else in the house because our two boys lived in Queensland, the other two boys. So it was nice.
Karen, could you explain to me what you would see the world looks like if all of us spent time actually taking that deep dive and healing our grief, which we all have, right?
Yeah, we all have in all different forms, and we all have more to come. I just feel that we'd all stand taller, as we said, our hearts would be more open. I think we would have more of a understanding, we'd be more empathetic. We would see people as I guess as we are. We so often we look at the exterior and we just see what I like to call the front of house, whereas we've all got a back of house inside of us, and we don't ever really deep dive into our own back of house a lot of the time, or anyone else's. And I just think that we would I would like to think that there would be less wars. There'd be a lot more understanding. There would be a lot more. So what? You look differently. You know what I mean? You still have flesh and blood. You still do everything that I do. You put your pants on, one leg at a time, all that sort of stuff. So we're all so different. All we want at the end of the day is to be able to provide for our families and live a happy and fulfilled life. Is that so bad? That's why I go into corporations to help them to understand that their people are important, because they are the ones that are your greatest assets. But you've got to see them that way. You can't see them as, oh, well, we need to save some money. Let's wreck someone's livelihood in doing that. That's why I was a CFO. It took me a while to figure out, why was I a CFO if I'm now doing this, sort of thing. But I knew I had to be there to live that life so that I can do what I'm doing now for people individually and also for companies. And that's what this pandemic is all about. Have you noticed? Stop. We all had to stop. Yep. And how quickly did the world begin to heal? How quickly did Mother Earth just go, right, I've got you all out of the way, just leave me to heal? How quickly have, even like you walk around and you look at the ocean, you look at the color. I had the beauty of that 6 weeks we were at the beach. We were allowed to go 10 Ks then. I know you can only go 5 now, but we could get to Balmoral, right? So we could get to Balmoral and we could get as far as Collaroy in our 10K radius, right? Because I was in Balgala. And you just looked at the ocean, or you looked at the lake around Narrabeen, and you could see the colours that had come back. And it's just amazing how quickly we heal when we stop, whether it's the nature, and nature is the best healer. If you're feeling down, just go and stand on some grass, put your feet in the ocean if you're lucky enough to be close to it. But honestly, it's just amazing, but you've got to stop. And that's it. You got to stop just all the shit that's in your head. You got to start talking to yourself as your own best friend. My first book is called The Journey to Becoming Your Own Best Friend. And when you start to see yourself as your own best friend, you start to talk to yourself a bit nicer. You start to eat better. You start to look after yourself. You start to actually go, wow, I am treating you like my own best friend. Because if you spoke to yourself, like if you spoke to your friend the way you speak to yourself sometimes, they wouldn't be your best friend for very long now, would they? So that's what it's about. So, yeah.
I love that. Absolutely. Stop and take the time to listen to what you're hearing. And absolutely. Lots of healing on lots of different levels if you're prepared to see it that way. But again, it comes down to that individual choice and individual interpretation.
Oh, totally. Yes.
Karen, I've loved this chat. I can see that we have plenty in common. There's
a lot in common.
Yeah, there's 3 things there. I'm going to share this again. Anyone who's lost someone, been made redundant, or had been through that adoption process from either side, so much value in what you've talked about. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I appreciate you. And thanks for the chat.
Thanks a lot. Bye, everyone. See you.
See ya.